Hey, US1 and happy baseball season. Yeah, I know. Anyway, joke of the day. So, what is the best way to get in contact with a fish? Just drop it a line. So, for today, what I have for you is basically we're going to finish the material, just get close to finishing the material. So, I have more notes for you to fill out on that graphic organizer. So, we'll finish that graphic organizer going all the way through the election of 1860. Again, putting in the work and the effort into this now will help you with an essay that you will have next week. So, yeah, so that's why you're doing this to make it real easy next week. Anyway, hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and any questions, just again, feel free to email me. Talk to you later. Bye. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to finish the 1850s and starting with a monumental Supreme Court case of Dred Scott v. Sanford. Sorry about that. So Dred Scott was a former slave who was suing for his freedom. The story is that Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri. His master was in the military. His master took him with him to Wisconsin when he was stationed. Well, first he was in Illinois when he was stationed in Illinois. From Illinois to Wisconsin, and then his master passes away. Dred Scott makes the argue that since his master brought him to free soil, therefore then he became free. So Missouri was a slave state. Illinois is a free state. Wisconsin is a free state. He then argued that he should then be free. Uh, his master dies. He is left in a will to someone else. That new master actually allows him to kind of pursue this case. And so it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court. And initially, the Supreme Court did not want to hear this case. But President Buchanan, whose thing is, well, if someone else can do all the heavy lifting for me, let them do it, decides to allow the Supreme Court, or actually encourages the Supreme Court to take this case. And the Supreme Court reluctantly takes this case. And Chief Justice Roger Taney issues a majority decision, first famously saying that blacks have no rights which the white man was bound to respect. And then lastly, that slavery is constitutional, that the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution grants property rights. If your constitutional rights are extended to you wherever you go as an American citizen, and so if you have the right to property, that right to property cannot be taken away. So if your property is your property in Missouri, your property remains your property in Illinois and Wisconsin, which means there's no way you can legally ban slavery. Slavery now is legal everywhere. It is a massive victory for the South in their argument trying to protect slavery. It is a huge blow to Northern abolitionists who are looking for a way to legally bring about an end to slavery through petitions, changing of laws, compromise, that type of stuff. But unfortunately, this Supreme Court case indicates that there is no legal way to bring about an end to slavery. The only way to do so would be to change the Constitution. And to change the Constitution, you need 3/4 of the states to agree. And when half of them have slaves, that is not going to happen. And so, as a result of this, the Compromise of 1820 is unconstitutional. The idea of popular sovereignty now is in question, right? The line 3630 does not apply, and that Congress has no power to regulate slavery anywhere in the United States. Slavery is legal, it is the law of the land. So politicians now have to deal with this. And so famously in Illinois, we have the Lincoln Douglas debates, in which Abraham Lincoln is debating Stephen Douglas for a position as a U.S. Senator from Illinois. There are 7 debates. Nobody thinks Lincoln is going to win these debates. Stephen Douglas, though, has a lot to lose. Stephen Douglas is a leading political figure around the country. Everyone assumes that Stephen Douglas is going to run for the presidency in 1860, and everyone assumes, since the Democrats are the dominant party in the country, that he will become president in 1860. So while Lincoln has got basically house money, he can do whatever he wants here, Stephen Douglas has to be careful. And so we have a series of debates around the state of Illinois. Lincoln opens these debates famously by saying, "A house divided upon itself cannot stand." This country can no longer continue to exist being either half slave or half free. And of course, in saying that, which side is Lincoln on? We don't know. He's an excellent politician. Um, but the most famous moment in these series of debates happens in Freeport, Illinois. And in Freeport, Illinois, Lincoln asks a humdinger of a question. Can the people of a territory in any lawful way exclude slavery from their limits prior to the formation of a state constitution? And he's asking this question of Stephen Douglas. And since this is in Freeport, Illinois, Douglas's response is the Freeport Doctrine. So it's a yes or no question. The problem is that Lincoln here has Admiral Akbar'd Stephen Douglas. It's a trap. And so if Douglas says yes, there is a way for people to ban slavery, well, it looks like you're going against that Supreme Court decision, which is going to tick off people in the South. Won't hurt you in the Illinois election, but will hurt you in the presidential election of 1860. If Douglas says no, that there is no way you can do this, it looks like he goes against his own idea of popular sovereignty, and he looks like a hypocrite on that idea. So Douglas's response: slavery cannot exist a day or an hour anywhere unless it is supported by local police regulations. Basically, Douglas says a law is only as good as its police enforcement, and if you don't like the law, simply don't enforce it. And so that truly infuriates the South. Here they have this massive Supreme Court victory, and Stephen Douglas basically says if Northerners don't like it, Northerners don't have to follow it. That is not going to help him in the election of 1860. In addition, we have an incident that happens in Harper's Ferry. And in Harper's Ferry, Virginia, out in western Virginia, so far out west, it's now in West Virginia. Thank you. Our buddy John Brown, remember John Brown from, basically creating violence and bloodshed in Kansas. He emerges on the scene again with an audacious plan to attack the federal arsenal in West Virginia. And the plan is that he will attack the federal arsenal in West Virginia, and he will grab all the guns in that arsenal, go out into the countryside, use those guns to free slaves, and and then arm those slaves, and those slaves then will go out and free other slaves, who will then free other slaves and free other slaves. Basically, what John Brown is advocating is a massive armed slave uprising throughout the country. It is a Southerner's worst nightmare. And this plan is financed by Northerners, right? So Northerners are funding this. Northerners are actually volunteering to assist John Brown in this endeavor. And so this is Harper's Ferry. And so Harper's Ferry is located on a peninsula. There's basically, it's easy to get in, it's going to be difficult to get out. And so someone like Frederick Douglass, who was recruited by John Brown to help him, Frederick Douglass says, this is a suicide mission. And there are some historians that believe that John Brown knew this and did this anyway, knew that he couldn't survive this attack, but wanted to become a martyr for the cause. So the raid goes horribly wrong. There are no guns in the arsenal, only spears. They try to do a massive slave uprising, but the slaves are resistant to rebel, so that doesn't happen. They wind up kidnapping someone. They actually hold a train hostage for a while and then let that train go, which just alerts the authorities. Eventually, by the following day, you have members of the Virginia militia arriving at Harper's Ferry. You have the United States Marines arriving at Harper's Ferry, and then you have locals that are fighting John Brown at Harper's Ferry. Brown is arrested. He is put on trial, and he is found guilty of treason, kidnapping, and murder, and he is executed. And his execution makes him a martyr. And so this further creates a disconnect between the North and the South. For Southerners, John Brown is as evil is, right? This is a guy who is advocating a massive slave uprising. He is advocating their worst fears. Northerners view him as a hero. There are songs written about him. Church bells peal throughout the North commemorating his death. you have writers writing about him. Um, and the thing is, and why many people support him now, is the idea of okay, what other option do people have? And it's an interesting kind of debate. So, someone like Frederick Douglass thought that John Brown was the noblest of people. You have people like Abraham Lincoln and William Lloyd Garrison who see John Brown as a terrorist, as the lowest of the low. And so the thought is, where do people divide on this? And for Southerners who see this, this is just one more, piece of evidence to indicate that the North is out to get them, that the North is against them. So before that, you had Stephen Douglas, Northern politician, basically saying you don't have to follow that Supreme Court decision. Now you have John Brown advocating a massive slave uprising, and Northerners supporting him, embracing him, and raising him up as a hero. Um, this is too much for the South. And all of this is happening right before a presidential election. Is the election of 1860. James Buchanan is not going to run for re-election. And what happens now is the Democratic Party actually splits. And so Northern Democrats continue to support Stephen Douglas. Southern Democrats, of course, cannot do that after his response in the Freeport Doctrine. So Southern Democrats support the Vice President, John Breckinridge. So now you have two Democratic candidates. Democrats quickly realize that, this is a recipe to lose the election. So then they nominate a third person as kind of a compromise candidate, and he is known as a constitutional unionist, right? So constitutional, referring to slavery, that slavery is constitutional, and unionist is the idea like keep the country together, which is supposed to appeal to Northerners. But really now what you have are three Democratic candidates running for the election in 1860. The opposition parties recognize this, and most of them step out of the election. The Republicans, a brand new party created in 1856, nominate Abraham Lincoln. And they nominate Abraham Lincoln on the third ballot. He wasn't their first choice, but he becomes their third choice. And the thing about Abraham Lincoln and why he eventually wins the nomination is because he's not an abolitionist. So Republicans, an abolitionist party, believe that Lincoln might actually be able to get them some more votes. In the South, they just recognize him as a Republican, and Republicans equal abolition. So Southerners vow if Lincoln wins this election, that they will leave the Union and rip the country into two. And so as election day comes, we have the results. As you can see, Lincoln wins in a plurality, meaning more individuals in the country actually vote for someone else. But because the Democratic Party is split three ways, Abraham Lincoln wins the election of 1860. New Jersey, because we're New Jersey, we don't vote for Lincoln. We actually split our votes between Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. But if you look at the electoral map, you can see the entire North votes for Lincoln. No votes for him in the South. Lincoln isn't even on the ballot in the South. And this is one more thing that shows the divide. This is one more thing for the South to realize that the North is out to get them. And as a result of this, it just further causes division within the country.